Welcome to The Explainer, where we dig into the source material to get to the real story. Today, we're tackling a massive topic, 1,000 years of Indian history, and we're going to see that the version we all learned, well, it might just be completely wrong.
Let's kick things off with a question that might make you pause. Have you ever noticed how we talk about the Spanish conquest of America but the Muslim conquest of India? One is about nationality, the other is about religion. So why the difference? What's really going on with that language? It's a choice, and it's a choice that has some big implications.
Okay, to get to the bottom of that, we have to ask, where did this story even come from? And what you'll find is that it's not some ancient truth. Nope, it's actually a pretty modern invention, and it was created for a very specific and very political reason. For more than 100 years, the standard textbook version of Indian history was split into these three neat little boxes: a Hindu era, then a quote-unquote Muslim era, and finally the British era. This whole idea came from a 19th century British historian named James Mill. But here's the thing. It wasn't just a timeline. Oh no, it was an argument. By carving up history based on religion, it basically guaranteed a story of endless conflict. And you don't have to look far to see the agenda. I mean, just look at this quote. Guys like Sir Henry M. Eliot, who were working for the British Empire, they did this on purpose. They cherry-picked these old chronicles, focusing only on the stories of violence and tyranny. Why? To paint the entire Muslim period as this terrible dark age. And if you do that, then suddenly, British colonial rule doesn't look like an invasion, it looks like a rescue. See how that works? All right, so let's just throw that whole framework out the window for a second. Let's go back in time, all the way to the 11th century, and look at what was actually happening on the ground. We're going to focus on two huge raids that took place just 3 years apart. And trust me, they tell a completely different story. So check out these two maps. On the left, you've got this raid coming up from the south, deep inside India. That's the Chola Empire. And on the right, you've got this other raid coming in from the northwest, from modern-day Afghanistan. That's Mahmud of Ghazni. Now, they're both headed for northern India, right? But the why behind these raids, they are worlds apart. And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at their goals. Rajendra Chola, he was after prestige. It was a ritual conquest. Mahmud of Ghazni, he wanted cash, pure and simple plunder. Now, don't get me wrong, both raids were incredibly violent and destructive. But the key is, these two guys were playing by totally different rulebooks, operating in completely different political universes. Okay, let's start with the Indian king, Rajendra Chola. To get what he was doing, we need to step inside his head, inside the political world he lived in. Historians call this the Sanskrit Cosmopolis, or the Sanskrit world. So think of the politics of this Sanskrit world less like a modern map with hard borders, and more like a giant, never-ending game of chess. It's a concept called the Mandala, which literally means circle. Power wasn't about owning land with fences around it. It was about your circle of influence, constantly shifting and radiating out from you, the king. And it worked something like this. You, the king, are at the center. Right next to you, those are your enemies. But the next circle out, your enemy's enemies, hey, those are your friends, or at least potential allies. The whole point of the game wasn't to wipe your enemies off the map. No, it was to defeat them, sure, but then to make them your vassals, to bring them into your circle of power. It was this constant dance of war and diplomacy. With that in mind, Chola's raid on Bengal makes perfect sense. It was a textbook move in this game, something called a Digvijaya, or a conquest of the quarters. It was basically a massive performance piece to show everyone, hey, I'm the big boss, the universal emperor. And get this, the loot he brought back wasn't just gold. He brought back jars of water from the holy Ganges River. It was this incredible symbolic power move, like he was literally picking up the sacred heart of India and moving it to his own capital. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. Within this system, attacking another king's main temple wasn't seen as an attack on his religion. It was a political statement. The royal temple was tied directly to the king's power. It was like his divine battery pack. So if you desecrated it, you were cutting him off from his source of legitimacy. It was a deeply political act aimed at a king, not a faith. Okay, now let's hit pause on that and pivot to our other guy, Mahmud of Ghazni. He's coming from a completely different universe, culturally and politically. This is the Persianate world. And just look at how massive this world was. It's important to get this. The Persianate world wasn't one big empire. And it wasn't just the Islamic world. It was this huge, interconnected cultural zone. What tied it all together was the Persian language, Persian literature, and shared ideas about how to run a government, how to make art, and what power looked like. So Mahmud's whole operation was built on a different logic. His military backbone was this elite Turkish horse cavalry from Central Asia, super expensive to maintain. And how did he pay for it? By raiding India. All that gold and treasure he looted wasn't just for kicks, it was fuel for his real ambitions, which were actually to the west, in Iran and Central Asia. It created this endless cycle, right? You raid for money to pay your troops, but to get more money, you need more troops, which means you gotta go on more raids. For him, political space wasn't a fixed chessboard, it was an open field, ripe for conquest. And at the heart of this system is the idea of the Sultan. Now this is a game changer.
In Persianate political thinking, and we're talking way before the European Enlightenment here, they saw the world of faith and the world of politics as two different things. A sultan was supposed to be this universal, almost secular ruler. His job was to be the authority for everyone in his territory, no matter their religion or ethnicity. And I mean, listen to this quote from a 14th century political thinker in the Delhi Sultanate. He says a country could do just fine with a non-Muslim ruler as long as he was just. But a country ruled by a Muslim would fall apart if he was unjust. The most important thing for a ruler wasn't piety, it was justice. And that idea, that's an incredibly powerful and flexible ideology for governing a place as diverse as India, right? So when you put it all together, you see the picture isn't a simple clash of religions, a Hindu versus Muslim thing. Not at all. What was really happening was this long, complicated, and sometimes violent encounter between two incredibly sophisticated cultural and political systems. The historian Richard Eaton really champions this idea. He says if we want to understand this era, we need to think of it as the interaction between the Sanskrit and Persianate worlds. That framework is just so much more powerful and way more accurate than falling back on that old, tired Hindu-Muslim conflict story. And you want to see how far these ideas traveled? Check this out. This quote is from a Hindu poet, writing in a court way down in southern India, hundreds of miles from the Sultanate in Delhi. And what's he writing about? The link between justice, prosperity, and a king's wealth. He's literally echoing a core Persianate political idea. This shows that these concepts weren't just forced on people. They were seen as good ideas, and people all over India picked them up and made them their own. So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, that's a neat history lesson, but so what? Well, this isn't just an academic debate. Changing how we see this past has massive real-world consequences for how South Asia works right now, today. Think about it. That simplistic us versus them religious narrative has been a weapon for centuries. The British used it for their whole divide and rule strategy. It became the historical justification for partitioning India and creating Pakistan in 1947. And even today, political groups all over South Asia still drag out this old story to stir up hatred and conflict. And here's the kicker. You know that famous story about Mahmud of Ghazni raiding the Somnath temple and stealing its giant sandalwood gates? It's one of the most explosive stories from this entire period. Well, it never happened. It's a total myth. The source material is clear. The British completely made it up in the 1840s. They just suffered a humiliating defeat in Afghanistan and invented the story to try and score political points with their Hindu subjects. I mean, it's just a stunning example of how history can be actively weaponized. So that really brings us to the final takeaway here. Getting the past right isn't just about being a good historian. It's about recognizing the incredible power that these stories have in our world today. And it really makes you think, if a story this big, this foundational, is so different from what we were all taught, what other histories have we been told? And what other truer stories are just waiting for us to uncover them?